What's up, everybody, and welcome into the ZFarls podcast. This is episode number 1, 2019, and we are going into 2020, and we've got 3 dreams for this podcast, and that is it. Number 1, it'll be at least 10 episodes. That's a guarantee to the listener. Number 2, it will get better each time. And number 3, we'll talk about everything, and we'll explore different setups, opportunities. Is it a live stream? Is it always have a video? Is it recorded? Is it interview-based? Those things will change up over time as we kind of dial it in. The one thing I've learned in years of creating content is you have to just do it and then tweak and build based off of there. I don't like the way this looks today, but this is the best that I could do for this moment to get it done, and really just was very interested in starting this. I've been delaying it for over at least a month, so I want to make sure that we can at least get an episode up in this year, get 2-3 episodes going so we have some rhythm, some routine, some workflow set up so that when we come back in the new year, we can really rock and roll. So that's what we're going to be up to, and just wanted to get this first episode started with kind of my backstory, how I got to where I am right now, and tell a little bit for those folks that don't know me, haven't followed kind of my Madden history for the last 10 years or so, or just follow me on Twitter, just started watching, morning streams or whatever. Just wanted to have that story out there in a kind of short format so that people can see it. So right now you could be watching on YouTube, or you could be listening, to a podcast. If you are listening on YouTube, what you can do, or if you're on the podcast, you can go over and listen to or see the notes over on the podcast page. I'll put up some photos that kind of reference the timelines that I'm talking about. And on YouTube, what I'm going to hope to do is edit in some screenshots to make sure. I know this isn't the prettiest YouTube camera, but we'll get the green screen down. We'll put up some equipment. This just works for what I have to do most days, so we'll see if it works for this. All right, it's 2010, and we just graduated from college. S. Gibbs, ZFarls. We've known each other since college, for those of you that didn't know that, and we're both working regular jobs in Boston, but we're maintaining a small Madden website on the side where we play games, give out tips and tricks, and do different things. So we end up starting a daily morning. No, excuse me. This is late. That's later. We end up starting a morning. Why do I keep saying morning? We end up starting a YouTube show called This Week in Madden, which basically covers news and topics of the day. I'll throw some photos up. The YouTube time limit back then was only 10 minutes. So you could only make a 10-minute video before you had to split it into part 1 and part 2, which was a pain in the neck. So we didn't have, at that time, the technology to live stream. It just didn't exist. The internet wasn't strong enough. The capture cards weren't there. So we just taped off a TV with a cell phone. So for those of you out there that are worried about technology, I'm always worried about technology. Do I have the best stuff? Do I have the latest stuff? Well, I'll start when I get this microphone. I'll start when I get this camera. Those are things I constantly think about. It just doesn't matter at the end of the day. Even this, it's not great quality. I'm not doing this for, if someone's going to get turned off by the quality of anything but my stories, which I understand will get better with time, then that is what is going to ultimately cost you. So we weren't concerned about the quality of the show because we felt like the content that we were making, for the 10 people who wanted to see it, there was probably only 10 people that wanted to know about Madden at the level we were talking about at that time, because there was just better resources. You could go to the EA website, learn more. You could go tons and tons of places and see better footage than what we were putting out. I mean, we only had footage like the demo trailer that we showed you that, and you could already see that on the Xbox home menu. So what we did was ended up recording tips and tricks off of the TV. We would play the game. Gibbs would come in, give tip of the day. We'd take questions. We would do trivia, all different kinds of stuff, and just kind of have fun with that. From there, we decided to go to a live format because we had an opportunity in Boston to use a recording space. So I had picked up a side job as a broadcaster, helping out folks that wanted to learn, and that space had what it took to stream at the time. Now, what it took to stream at the time was like a $25,000 computer, obviously, that I didn't have funds for. So this building had one, they had a space, and we got to record live streams there. So in the meantime, we had streamed from like our webcam on a laptop. We had streamed from, you know, just any means necessary that we could, possibly cell phones. Like, it was just rough. But we started over there. We actually used Ustream. Twitch wasn't quite around. It was Justin.tv at the time, so we used Ustream. So all of our old archives are kind of buried in there. You can find some of them. The show quality was pretty good, I think, for the day. But it wasn't, once again, something that we really were super concerned about. We were more concerned with the content of the tips and the message. And we're trying to teach players just that you could be better at Madden if you put the time in and learned kind of some fundamental principles about the game and about Madden and about football, and could dive deeper into it. So it's hot in here. We'll be changing up this camera over time if you're watching the podcast. If you're not, again, I'm a big podcast audio guy. I could care less about the YouTube clip. So I'll stop referencing that, because when I listen on my headphones when I'm walking around, I'm like, no, I'm not watching YouTube. Sorry. We're in Boston. We got this show going on. We do it going on 2 years, 3 years, having guests in. T. Davis comes on the stream. We've got all kinds of different guests. And it's going pretty good. It's going pretty good. We're getting 30 people to watch, which is awesome. They're chatting. They're active. They're excited. They're joining our forums. Then we maybe get, I think, up to 300 people to watch. I want to say that was the progression over like the 2 or 3 years. Now we got a website. One of the guys that we worked with created us like an actual website because we didn't know how to do it well. We did it poorly, but then he made it fancy, which was cool to have this thing. Websites were great back then. There was not really any social media. We got on Twitter, but wasn't really used in that fashion that it is today. Not everyone was on there, so the conversations didn't exist there. Things really only started on the web. But we're still working our regular jobs and just kind of doing this on the side. Things did change. We were getting ready to kind of give up. Just not give up in a it's over sense, but just give up in a, like, can't keep doing this sense, because gotta go along with our lives and keep focused on our career and all that kind of stuff. But we did get a phone call from Prima Games, who is a guide publisher for Madden at the time, and they said, do you want to write the strategy guide for Madden 12? Gibbs and I said, okay, well, we're definitely interested, but we had to quit our jobs. So we kind of both sat down and talked about it. So what we decided was, yeah, this is an opportunity we had to take. This is kind of what we had been working towards, not knowing, but it ended up working out. So we set off to California. We set off to Orlando to play the game early and write a 300-page book, none of which we had any skills for or had written any books before. We just knew we liked to play Madden and tell people how to hopefully get better at the game, and that was our main goal. So that worked out. We did it for Madden 12, did it for Madden 13, 25, 15, 16, and that was where we were at. Over that time, we met a lot of cool people, met a lot of cool community members. We did, Madden 16 was the first year that MCS was around, so we jumped in on that and helped out a little bit there with some broadcasting. We were just, growing. We had YouTube going on. We tried different things. We failed a ton. I think a later episode of this podcast will just be all the things I failed at, my top 5 lifetime failures, and that is definitely one of them, in a sense of people would probably think it was a success. I still think it's a success. I liked it. I enjoyed it, but we just messed up tons of stuff. Nothing super bad, but there was some things looking back where I'm like, man, if we had done this just a little bit different, or we had thought about this thing this way, or if the timing was slightly better, we could have gone down this path or that path or another path. And so looking back, I'm more negative. Gibbs tends to generally be more positive about those times. They were great times, great people. led us to where we were today. So there's nothing that I would even do different, even knowing. I would do a couple things different, but we'll talk about those in a future episode. That's a teaser. Subscribe to the podcast. But we then got an opportunity to head down to EA and work there. And that's not something I'm going to cover much in this podcast, kind of what I do at EA. You guys have seen me on the morning streams. I say what I do on Twitter. But for the most part, it's, I'm not going to go in depth with what we do over there. I'm not even really going to take questions. Like, this isn't really the platform for, like, when does the next thing drop. We'll use official channels for that. This is just a personal project, fun, not related to that in any way. Where, if you want to know more about me as an individual, that's what we'll cover. And we'll also have some guests and do stuff like that. So just to get that out of the way as well. All right, not to make this story drag on any longer, but then we ended up moving down to Orlando, working at EA, and the rest is kind of history from there. But those middle years, that kind of middle gap, that gap between college, the real world, and the book writing world, the online content creator world, that's really, when I think back, when I was in like the 2010 through 2015s, everything was like 2004. Like, you're in high school, you're in college, like those years, that is where my brain goes back to. And now, when I look back, it's like, now that it's 2019, 2020, you look and you're like, ooh, 2011, like, ooh, I was doing this. So that's a whole chapter now that's kind of closed, kind of has like a stamp on it now. Whereas when I was in it, 2016, 2017, 2011, didn't really carry anything. And like 2004, 2004 was more like the time frame I look back to put things in perspective of where I was. But now that chapter's more closed, I can look back and kind of think about, I was doing this, I learned this skill, I met this person, this led to that. It's more clear what led to what, as opposed to when I was in it and I couldn't really make anything out of it. So that's pretty much all for my story. It's not really that great of a story, but people are interested by it. People don't necessarily understand the content creator game and building a channel, building a community, building an audience, and that's something that I've enjoyed a ton of, just because I get to meet people. I get to meet Wolfmans out there, the Ben Hoves, the Hopes, the Frogs, everybody's XX username XX, all those people, the D Stews, the people that have been there for a long time. W Pools, like, there's still people, if I pop on and stream and I haven't in a long time, they'll pop in, and that makes me feel great. And so those relationships, even though they're not necessarily like, true real world relationships, I've met some of those people in the real world, but not necessarily. That's valuable to me, because when you have people out there that they don't rely on you, but they're excited when you create something, it makes you want to create more things. I think we'll cover in a future episode, like, a little bit of like a blockage I've had when trying to create stuff recently. Just haven't had the same, like, I'm gonna hop on and make this thing, and if it's bad, I don't care, which is pretty much the only thing I've ever actually been able to do, is like make something, and if it's bad, still put it out. I've not had that same muscle recently. That's why this podcast, like I said, I know this isn't the final format. I know it's not great. I know it's not what it's going to be. I know we're going to get different microphone, different lighting, change the camera angle, take the green screen down, switch the lights, stop moving the camera here. Every time you bump the desk, this happens. There's a guy mowing his lawn. Like, that just went out of focus. Like, I know all of that stuff is going to change, but it just doesn't. It doesn't matter past a certain level. Like, yeah, if the audio is buzzing, that's going to be distracting. People are going to tune out. But once you achieve a certain level of base stuff, there's nothing more you can do. So you have to just get going. And a better camera, different camera, newer camera, it's never going to truly matter. Only if it changes, like, what the format of the show is. Like, oh, well, now that we have two cameras, we can do this. Or now that we have a second microphone, we can interview this person. Or now that we have a computer that doesn't crash when we use Skype, we can call this person in. Unless it changes your format, or the way your content actually is, it just doesn't matter. But people use that as an excuse. And I'm guilty as anybody. So anytime I say people do this, people do that, it's like I've just done that. I'm just saying that people do it. So those are some things to consider. This will be the first episode of the pod. Remember, it will be what I'm thinking, and like I said, this could change. Aside from there being 10 episodes, it probably will be a YouTube video as long as people think it's good enough, and then there'll be the audio version, which is the point of a podcast. And we'll try and do show notes. We'll try and add a little context over the top of the YouTube video with just some images, and try and make the set a little bit better, a little bit nicer. But that's kind of my story. If you didn't know it, sure there's probably more in there I'm missing. I could go more in depth. But if you just saw me recently, who is this guy? I get a lot of that. Like, who is this guy? Why is this guy telling me this? Why is this guy telling me that? Why do you give tips? Like, well, because, that's my history. But if you didn't know that, that's totally cool because I haven't done it in a few years anyway. So, and it's not necessarily what I want to be defined as forever. It's not what my identity will always be. So, it's fluid out there. I'll be changing out what I do, who I am, who the community knows me as. Always be adapting, always be growing, hopefully, and always be helping other folks unlock what they want to do. So that's my current life story in regards to Madden in a short amount of time to get this thing kicked off. And we'll be back with another episode shortly of the ZFarls podcast. If you have questions, if you have feedback, let me know. Like I said, feedback is great. You don't like this, we don't like that. That will help me if I see enough of the same thing. I will take it to heart. So that's all I got for you. Until next time, stay hungry, lock up, and we'll